Before he became one of the most important leaders in Christianity, Peter was simply a fisherman. He was not a scholar trained in the great schools of Jerusalem. He was not a priest serving in the temple. He was not a wealthy or powerful man whose name was known in the cities of the Roman Empire. In fact, by the standards of his time, Peter was just an ordinary man. The kind of man people might pass by every day without giving much thought. A hard-working laborer whose life revolved around survival, responsibility, and long days of physical work. No one in those early years could have imagined that his name would one day be remembered across the entire world. Yet, at that time, his life was simple, quiet, predictable. His days were shaped by the rhythm of the lake and the endless cycle of work that came with being a fisherman. Peter's hands told the story of his life. They were rough and calloused from years of hard labor. The skin of his palms had hardened from pulling thick ropes and heavy fishing nets that were often soaked with water and weighed down with fish. Every day, he handled equipment that demanded strength and endurance. The nets were made of strong fibers that could scrape and burn the skin when pulled too quickly. The ropes were heavy and coarse, and after years of gripping them, Peter's hands had become tough enough to withstand the pain. His arms were strong. His shoulders carried the weight of years spent hauling nets from deep water. Fishing was not simply a profession in Galilee. It was a way of life. It required patience, resilience, and a willingness to work through long hours with no guarantee of success. Peter lived in a world where survival depended on the unpredictable waters of the Sea of Galilee. Some days the lake was generous. Other days it seemed empty. And every fisherman knew that no matter how experienced you were, the sea could never be fully controlled. Fishing demanded more than strength. It required knowledge passed down through generations. Fishermen had to understand the winds, the temperature of the water, the seasons when fish moved closer to shore, and the hours when they were most active. Many of these skills Peter had likely learned from his father. Long before he became known as Peter the Apostle, he had been Simon the fisherman, a man shaped by the traditions of his family and the demands of his trade. The work often began at night. Many fishermen in Galilee preferred to fish in the darkness when the waters were cooler and the fish swam closer to the surface. This meant that while most of the town was asleep, Peter and the other fishermen were already awake and preparing their boats. The air before sunrise was often cold and quiet. A soft mist sometimes hovered over the water. The lake itself could appear almost perfectly still, reflecting the faint glow of the stars above. In those early hours, the world felt peaceful. The silence was broken only by the gentle sound of water touching the wooden sides of the boats and the creaking of ropes as fishermen prepared their nets. Peter knew those sounds better than anyone. They had become the background music of his life. Night after night, he and his brother Andrew would push their boat into the dark water and row out onto the lake. Sometimes they worked alone. Other times they worked near other fishing boats, their small lanterns flickering in the darkness like distant stars on the water. Once they reached the right spot, they would cast their nets into the lake. Then they waited. Fishing required patience. Sometimes they pulled the nets up quickly. Other times they waited for long stretches of time, hoping the fish would gather inside. Many nights they were fortunate. The nets would grow heavy with movement. When they pulled them up, the fish would shimmer in the dim light, twisting and splashing as they were lifted into the boat. On those nights, the fishermen felt relief. A good catch meant a good morning at the market. It meant money for food. It meant security for their families. But there were also nights when the nets returned empty. Hours of work in the darkness would produce almost nothing. Sometimes the nets would come up filled only with weeds, small debris, or tangled lines. Those were the frustrating nights. By the time dawn arrived, Peter and Andrew would be exhausted, their muscles sore, their patience tested, and yet they had no choice but to try again the next night. Fishing in Galilee was unpredictable. Every fisherman knew that success was never guaranteed. Still, Peter continued the work because it was the life he had always known. His real name was Simon. He had been born in a small fishing town called Bethsaida, located along the northern edge of the Sea of Galilee. Bethsaida was not a large or impressive city. It was a humble community where many families depended directly on the lake for their survival. Boats lined the shoreline. Fishing nets hung outside homes to dry in the sun. Children grew up watching their fathers and older brothers prepare for long nights on the water. For many young boys in Bethsaida, becoming a fisherman was not simply a choice. It was their future. Later in life, Simon and Andrew moved to another town called Capernaum. Capernaum sat along the shore of the same lake and had become an important center for fishing, trade, and travel. The town was always active. Boats arrived early in the morning loaded with fresh fish. Merchants waited near the shore to buy the catch and transport it to nearby towns and markets. The smell of fish filled the air as fishermen cleaned their nets and repaired small tiers from the previous night's work. Voices could be heard everywhere, men calling to one another, merchants negotiating prices, workers carrying baskets filled with fish. For Simon, this was completely normal. It was the world he had always lived in. There were no dreams of fame or influence. Simon's ambitions were simple. Work hard, catch fish, provide for his family, continue the life his father and ancestors had lived before him. Simon worked closely with his brother Andrew. The two of them shared more than just the same profession. They shared the same long nights on the water, the same exhausting labor, the same quiet understanding that comes from working side by side for years. Often they did not need many words to communicate. A simple glance or gesture was enough to know what the other was thinking. Their boat was more than just a tool. It was their workplace, their shelter during storms, and sometimes even their place of rest after long hours of labor. Many nights they sat quietly in that boat, staring across the dark water, while waiting for their nets to fill. Together they pushed their boat into the lake beneath the pale light of the moon. The water would ripple softly as the boat moved forward. Rowing slowly, they would travel to the deeper parts of the lake before casting their nets. Then they waited. Minutes could feel like hours. Sometimes they spoke quietly. Other times they simply listened to the sounds of the water and the wind. The lake at night was peaceful, but the work itself was demanding. Pulling heavy nets required strength and coordination. The ropes could burn against their hands. The weight of the catch strained their backs and shoulders. By the time the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, their bodies were often sore and tired. Yet this routine continued night after night, year after year. It was the only life Simon had ever expected to live. But everything changed the day Andrew introduced Simon to a man named Jesus. Andrew had recently been spending time listening to a preacher known as John the Baptist. John was not like most teachers. He lived in the wilderness rather than in the cities. His clothing was simple and rough. His message was powerful and urgent. He called people to repentance and spoke about preparing the way for someone greater who was coming. Many believed John was a prophet sent by God. Large crowds gathered near the Jordan River to hear him speak and to be baptized. Andrew had been among those who listened carefully to John's teachings. He sensed that something important was happening. Then one day, during one of those gatherings, something unexpected occurred. As John was speaking to the crowd, a man walked by in the distance. John suddenly stopped. He turned his attention toward the man and pointed. Looking directly at him, John made a declaration that captured everyone's attention. "Behold, the Lamb of God." Those words were powerful. For the people listening, they carried deep meaning connected to sacrifice, redemption, and the promises of God. Andrew could not ignore what he had just heard. If John truly believed this man was the one sent by God, then Andrew needed to know who he was. Curious and hopeful, Andrew began to follow Jesus. He listened as Jesus spoke. He watched how he interacted with people. There was something different about him. Something calm, yet powerful. Something that stirred hope in the hearts of those who heard him. The more Andrew observed, the more convinced he became. He believed he had found someone extraordinary. Someone worth introducing to the person he trusted most. So, without hesitation, Andrew went to find his brother Simon. When he found him, Andrew could hardly contain his excitement. His voice carried urgency and joy at the same time. "We have found the Messiah," he said. Simon probably didn't fully understand what Andrew meant at first. The word Messiah carried enormous significance for the Jewish people. For generations, they had been waiting for the Messiah, the promised leader who would be sent by God. Many people hoped for him. Many people searched for signs that he had come, but few truly believed they had actually found him. Still, Andrew insisted that Simon come and meet Jesus. Perhaps Simon was curious. Perhaps he was skeptical. But eventually he agreed. And in that simple moment, when Simon decided to meet this man named Jesus, something extraordinary began. Because Simon the fisherman was about to begin a journey that would transform his life forever. And the man who once lived quietly beside the Sea of Galilee would soon become known to the world as Peter, the rock upon which the church would stand. But the hardest moment of Peter's journey was still ahead. The night felt different. heavy, as if something invisible was pressing down on everything around them. They were gathered together to share a meal. What should have been a moment of peace carried an unspoken tension. Jesus spoke in a way that unsettled them, not in parables this time, not in mysteries, but plainly, directly. He began to talk about betrayal, about suffering, about what was coming. The disciples looked at one another, confused, uncertain, and then Jesus said something that no one expected. "This very night, all of you will fall away on account of me." The words hung in the air. All of them? Even after everything they had seen? Even after everything they had left behind? Peter couldn't accept it. Not him. Not after everything. His loyalty felt unshakable. His confidence absolute. "Even if all fall away, I never will." You can hear the determination in his voice, the sincerity. Peter wasn't pretending. He truly believed it. But Jesus looked at him with that same knowing gaze, the kind that sees beyond words, beyond intentions, into reality. "Truly I tell you," Jesus said, "this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." It must have felt impossible. Peter shook his head. "No, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And the others said the same. But sincerity is not always the same as strength. Later that night, everything began to unravel. Jesus was arrested. Suddenly, the calm presence they had relied on was gone. Chaos replaced it. Fear spread quickly. The disciples scattered. And Peter, who had once stepped out of a boat in the middle of a storm, now followed at a distance. Not close, not beside Jesus, at a distance. He found himself in a courtyard, a place lit by firelight. People gathered, whispering, watching, waiting. Peter stood among them, trying not to be noticed, trying to blend in, trying to stay close without being seen. Then it happened. A servant girl looked at him carefully. There was recognition in her eyes. "You also were with Jesus of Galilee," she said. The moment arrived, suddenly, without warning, and Peter felt it, the pressure, the fear, the risk, and he said it. "I don't know what you're talking about." One denial. He moved away, hoping to disappear into the shadows, but another person saw him. This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth. Again, the moment, again, the choice, and this time, stronger. "I don't know the man." 2 denials. Time passed. The tension grew. Then others approached. "Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away." Now there was no escape, no hiding, no blending in. And Peter, overwhelmed by fear, began to insist, "I don't know the man," 3 times. And then a sound broke through the night. A rooster crowed. In that instant, everything came rushing back. The words Jesus had spoken, the warning, the certainty. Peter turned, and somewhere in the distance, their eyes met. Not with anger, not with rejection, but with knowing. And Peter understood not just what he had done, but who he really was. Not as strong as he thought, not as fearless as he believed. Human, fragile, capable of failing, even in the moments that mattered most. He walked away and wept, not quietly, not politely, but deeply, broken. And this is what makes Peter's story so powerful, because it doesn't hide failure. It reveals it, fully, honestly. But his story does not end in failure. Days later, everything changed again. The tomb was empty. Jesus had risen. At first, it was hard to believe, even for Peter. But then he saw it for himself. And hope, something he thought he had lost, began to rise again. Still, there was something unresolved, because failure leaves questions behind. Shame, regret. Silence. Peter had denied Jesus 3 times. And even though Jesus was alive, what did that mean for him now? Then came the moment that would restore everything. Peter was back by the sea, the same sea where it all began, the same familiar waters. As if life had come full circle, he went fishing again, not because he had forgotten, but because sometimes, when we don't know what to do next, we return to what we used to know. All night they fished, and once again, they caught nothing. At dawn, a voice called from the shore, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat." It sounded familiar. Something about it stirred recognition. They obeyed, and suddenly, the nets filled again, overflowing, just like before. John recognized it first. It is the Lord. And Peter didn't hesitate. He didn't wait for the boat. He didn't think twice. He jumped into the water and swam toward Jesus. When they reached the shore, Jesus had prepared a fire. Fish, bread, a quiet meal, no accusations, no lectures, just presence. And then came the moment, the restoration. Jesus looked at Peter and asked, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Not Peter, Simon, as if bringing him back to the beginning. "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." "Feed my lambs," Jesus replied. Again, Jesus asked, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." "Take care of my sheep." A third time. "Simon, do you love me?" Now Peter felt it, the weight of it. 3 questions, mirroring 3 denials, not to shame him, but to restore him. "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Feed my sheep." In that moment, everything was redeemed, not erased, but transformed. Peter's failure did not disqualify him. It prepared him, because now he understood something he didn't before: grace. And from that moment forward, Peter was no longer the man who would deny out of fear. He became the man who would stand with courage. After Jesus ascended, the disciples gathered again, waiting, uncertain. But this time, something was different. Then came the day of Pentecost. A sound like a rushing wind filled the place, and something like fire rested upon them. The Holy Spirit had come, and Peter, the same man who once denied Jesus in front of a few people, stood before a crowd, not hiding, not afraid, but bold, clear, unshaken. He spoke with authority, with conviction, with fire, and thousands believed. The fisherman had become a leader. The impulsive man had become a foundation. The one who once fell had become the rock. And his story reminds us of something powerful, that greatness is not found in never failing, but in being transformed after you do. And maybe that's where Peter's story becomes our story, because it was never about being perfect. Peter walked on water and still sank. He followed Jesus and still failed. He was called the Rock and still broke under pressure. And yet, he was chosen, not because he never fell, but because he kept coming back, because he was willing to grow, to be transformed, to trust again, even after failure. So the question is not, have you ever failed? The real question is, what will you do after? Because if God could use a fisherman, a man who doubted, a man who denied, then maybe He's not done with you either.